Xavier University at Niño de Cagayan offers Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy. For over decades of experiencing excellence, its philosophy program continues to embody the spirit of excellence, preparing and molding the students with priestly and religious life, and law and paralegal practice, and other field of studies. But there is more to discover. With quality learning begins from the competent philosophy instructors, to the leaping of one's faith towards enlightenment, and to uncover the idea of the divine through the pre-divinity track. Strengthen your logical judgment and your sense of justice through philosophy's pre-law track. Philosophy, the foundation of critical thinking, the root of our education, the beginning of journey to learning. In philosophy, there is more to wonder, more to ponder, and more to discover. Choose philosophy. Dare to think.
Good morning, everyone. We have a few reminders for you. Please put your mic into mute mode when you're not in use to avoid any disruption in the entire duration of the webinar. If you want to speak, you may unmute your microphone to be recognized. We encourage you to turn your cameras on and wear appropriate dress when in an online meeting for the sake of formalities. Thank you. Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the webinar hosted by the Philosophy 29 A3 Class Group 2. We thank you for showing interest to be here with us despite the current setup. To formally start our program, let us have the invocation to be followed by the singing of the national anthem.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فقال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم آمين يا رب العالمين الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم اجمع شامل المسلمين والكريستيان والأمة في مدينة دباو وسلم دائما مجتمعنا هذا بالسلم والأمن والتقدم في بلدنا هذا آمين يا رب العالمين ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على خير خلقه سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين يا رب العالمين.
In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you today to praise and worship you and give you thanks for all the things you continue to provide for ourselves and our families. Father, we humbly ask for forgiveness for all the times we have offended you, when we forget to acknowledge your presence in the image of our brothers and sisters, and for moments we fail to be good stewards of the blessings you have given us. Continue to guide and protect each one of us, Lord, that we may always walk in the light of your everlasting love and mercy. Grant us, Father, with your comfort in times of distress and with your strength in times of weakness. May in turn become instruments of gentleness and compassion to others. We ask all this in the name of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, with the prayer and the intercession of our Blessed Mother.
Mabantog ka, warag po ko ilingkoy ko. O Diyos, kahibulungan ka, busa ikaw lang ang simbahon ko. Busa ikaw lang ang alagaran ko.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Once again, good morning to our dear audiences. But before we proceed, I would like to ask two persons from our audiences to share their expectation for today's event. you may unmute your mic to speak. So for those who want to speak, to share their expectations, you may unmute your mic.
Is it okay na I don't turn on my camera?
Yes, it is okay.
Okay.
As long as you speak.
Sige. So, I expect today to learn a lot of things, especially about accountability in terms of climate change mitigation and disaster response po. That's all.
Okay, so thank you so much. What is your name again?
Jose Santos po.
Thank you so much, Jose Santos. You said that you're expecting to learn about our case study itself on our moral duty on the youth climate change and disaster response. So can I ask other speaker again to share their expectations?
My expectation for this morning is that to learn something new about what is happening about the world and also the climate change and how as kanang unsa na to as a humans to kanang prevent or in times nga nanata nga situation ato na siyang ma-prevent and to learn some values about the nature itself. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. So you are saying that you are expecting to learn about how to prevent from the climate change environmental negative effects, and you want to learn also the moral values that these natural phenomenon may have. Thank you, Sheriffs. So now this webinar will not be possible without you, our audiences. So let us acknowledge each presence, and I hope you have taken your breakfast today. So good morning again. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Nikka Natan of AB Philosophy, currently a third-year philosophy student, facilitating for today's webinar. This morning, we will be presenting our case study on moral duty of the youth in disaster response and climate change mitigation. The presence of climate change is undeniable. The proofs that were proven by the studies of climate scientists can never be denied. In the present time, some of the anticipated effects of global warming begins to happen. Things like rising oceans, intense droughts, heat waves, and powerful storms. No doubt that there's a discernible human influence on global climate. So we are now stuck on the question, what will the future hold if these negative effects in the environment due to climate change continues? Are there moral issues that concerns to this natural phenomenon? If so, what are these? With this being said, to give us a deeper understanding about the topic, allow me to introduce to you our speakers for today's webinar. They are currently in junior year of Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy, Philo track at Xavier University, Ateneo de Cagayan. Please help me welcome Mr. Jacob Ephraim Gali and Mr. Neil Tagarao.
Good day, everyone. I know this topic of climate change is kind of common issue. We always hear from the news, schools, and even to other people perhaps. But have we ever asked these questions? What is the moral issue behind this occurring climate change? And what can I do to mitigate its effect? At the end of this discussion, we hope you find yourself being in a state of awareness and knowledgeable enough to take a lead and be part of the solution in solving these issues we have today. But for a quick review, What is weather? What is climate? And what is climate change? So basically, weather refers to a short-term atmospheric conditions or basically the way the atmosphere is behaving. O sa mas madaling salita, ito ay ang pagbabago-bago ng panahon kung saan pwedeng maulan ngayong araw at mainit naman bukas. While climate is the description of the long-term pattern of weather in a particular area. Ito ay ang mahabang panahong tag-ulan o mas kilala bilang La Niña at El Niño naman sa mahabang tag-init. But I will ask you a question. Is La Niña and El Niño a product of climate change? The answer is no. The former and the latter have existed thousands of years ago. Pwede ba natin itong mapigilan? The answer is still no. Because El Niño and La Niña are naturally occurring climate patterns at wala tayong direktang kakayahang impluensyahan ang kanilang pagkakabuo, kalakasan o tagal nito sa ating atmosfera. So I hope it's clear now to you the differences between weather and climate. So now we proceed in discussing climate change. So what is climate change? Climate change is a long-term change in the average weather patterns o ang matagalang pagbabago ng ating klima. Human activities commonly cause climate change. Energy sectors produce greenhouse gas emissions through transportations, electricity and heat, construction of buildings, construction and manufacturing, fugitive emissions, and other combustions of fuel. From the rising temperature worldwide, longer and extreme droughts, and to the destructive disasters, we made them all happen. So why do we not bother ourselves to ask these three questions? Number one, what is the moral issue? Number two, what can I do to solve this moral issue? And number three, why does it matter? So let me answer the first question first. What is the moral issue? First, the moral issue here is the anthropocentrism. So philosophically speaking, it is defined as that ito ay ang paniniwala lang ang ibang mga nilalang kagaya ng mga hayop, halaman o iba pa ay instrumento lamang para sa benepisyo ng ating mga tao. For example, a tree. For most of us, we use it as a tool for building a house, which is good and useful. But in the case we have benefited from the nature, but the consequences we get is about lifetime. Forests are the home of 80% of life on Earth. They are barriers against erosions and landslides. They give fresh air, clean drinking water in the rivers, and they attract the rain. Ngunit dahil sa ating paniniwalang tayong mga tao ang mas nakakalamang sa lahat ng mga nilalang dito sa mundo, their value become lesser and we now experience such as massive flooding and massive landslides. At alam nyo ba kung ang kadalasang nagdudusa nito? Most of the victims are the poor peasants, farm workers, and the urban poor. Kung hindi ba kayo nagtataka kung bakit kadalasan sa mga nakikita nating balita ay mga mahihirap ang mga namamatay, sugatan, nangihingin ng tulong at paulit-ulit na lang itong nangyayari sa ating bansa. And I will quote late former DNR Secretary Gina Lopez, ang mga mahihirap ang magdudusa kung winawasak natin ang ating kalikasan. Hindi ba kayo nababagabag or even felt disturbed that deforestation and the emission of greenhouse gases have contributed to the existence of the climate change? So we can now proceed to our second question, which is, what can I do? Or what can you do? Sasagutin natin ang tanong na ito base sa siyensya at pilosopiya. Reforestation projects aims to restore places where severe environmental degradation is taking place. The goals of reforestation can span for economic benefits, cultural values, environmental conservations to climate change solutions. Number 2 is investing in energy-efficient technologies. According to the Department of Energy, by replacing fossil fuels with renewable sources of energy and by increasing energy efficiency, the carbon intensity of energy can be minimized. Solar energy, wind energy, tidal energy, hydropower, and many more are currently the most common renewable energy sources. Number 3, reducing water waste. We have several ways in which we can practice water conservations even at home. First, for agricultural purpose, such as watering landscape, lawns, and gardens, wastewater can be used. Second, water that is used from washing food or cooking on the non-potable water can be used for things that does not affect food safety. Third, storing and using water according to what is required and needed is the most important thing to remember in conserving water. And lastly, by simply turning off the running water in our faucets that are not in use. Number 4, supporting environmental movements. The World Wildlife Fund is a worldwide environment organization focusing on the protection of the Earth's natural resources. This includes our forests, oceans, among others. They are responsible for Earth Hour, an annual worldwide movement wherein lights are turned off homes and business from 8:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. This event is conducted to celebrate sustainability or even in the implementation within our LGUs, that is the ban plastic bags, proper waste management, and many more action. And number 5, the fighting for climate justice. The concept of climate justice evolved from the concept of environmental justice. The aim of the movement was to rethink environmental issue and social issues by ensuring the low economic sectors of the population and the ethnic minorities were not disproportionately affected by the adverse environmental impacts or hazards. So in order to mitigate the injustices on climate change, which is only the poor communities or poor countries suffer from its consequences, the Paris Agreement was initiated as the first international agreement to fight for climate justice. The movement aims to create a long-term temperature goal by setting a limit on countries' global peak of greenhouse gas emissions. And lastly, one way to solve this issue in the anthropocentrism is to intrinsically value our environment. O ang pagbibigay halaga sa ating kapaligiran hindi lang bilang isang instrumento, kundi mismo sa kanyang kabuuan. In other words, we value them as they are. Put it in a simpler way. Diba, kung naglalakad tayo sa kalsada at napakainit ng panahon, maghahanap talaga tayo ng masisilungan o kadalasan dumadaan tayo sa ilalim ng mga puno. Now, we have benefited from that tree, which is its shade provide us. But for how long do we expect that the tree will continue existing? There is a higher chances that it will only live for a short moment of time. Why? Because we often view things such as the tree for the sake of our benefit. Then we are now on a third and final question. Why does it matter? Kung matibay ang ating paniniwala na ang halaga ng kapaligiran ay importante sa mundo, ay magkakaroon tayo ng sapat na kaalaman at pagmamahal sa ating kapaligiran. Therefore, it really matters to become part of the solution. Because man and the environment coexist for the common good of the world. Ang tao at ang kapaligiran ay nagbibigay balanse sa pagkakaiba-iba nating dito sa mundo. This is in relation with Aristotle's golden mean. Ang ibig sabihin nito ay dapat hindi tayo magkulang sa pagbibigay halaga sa ating kapaligiran at hindi naman dapat sobra-sobra dahil hindi natin makakamit ang balanse na siyang nagbibigay tunay na solusyon. This is what men should continue to pursue because it is only in this way we can mitigate the ongoing and future effect of natural and human-made disasters. Men should treat the environment as part of beings in order to value its existence in itself, and not mere instruments for human progress. Let me end this discussion by quoting Nicholas Agar in his book Life's Intrinsic Value. The intrinsic value associated with life forms is the foundation of the environmental ethics, enabling us to recognize nature's importance. Thank you for listening, and that's all.
You have heard the moral issue behind of climate change and our role in mitigating it. Now we have come to one of its results, and that is disaster. We have seen on news, may it be in our televisions or social media outlets, how destructive the typhoons become, especially here in the Philippines. For this reason, we are now looking towards our moral duty as youth in the communities in doing disaster response. For a quick review, a disaster is a serious disruption of the functioning of society, causing widespread human, material, or environmental losses that exceeds the local capacity to respond and calls for external assistance. A disaster is divided into two categories. First, the natural disasters, and second is the human-made disasters. Natural disasters pertain to those caused by hydrometeorological, geological, and biological hazards. Ang mga halimbawa nito ay ang mga pagbaha, buhawi, at ipo-ipo. While human-made disasters pertain to those category of disasters result from human actions or technological failures. Ito yung mga trahedyang dulot ng ating kapabayaan, kaya't nagre-resulta ito sa sunog, oil spills, at kabilang na rin dito ang gyera. So we are done with providing descriptions about the two types of disasters. We now proceed to the impact of natural and human-made disasters. Isa sa mga halimbawa ng natural na trahedya ay si Bagyong Ulysses. Noong nakalipas na taon sa araw ng 12 ng Nobyembre, ay hinagupit ni Bagyong Ulysses ang ating bansa. Siguradong lahat sa atin ay alam kung ano ang nangyari doon. Nag-trend pa nga ang yung hashtag UlyssesPH at hashtag RescuePH para sa mas mabilisang paghahanap ng mga survivors. Typhoon Ulysses took 39 lives and about 1,800 individuals have been evacuated. Sa kabilang dako naman, ang Marawi Siege. Ito ay isa sa mga halimbawa ng human-made disasters. The killing was more than 1,000 civilians and almost 200,000 people have been displaced by the war. So what is really the point here? The point here is that disasters displaced people o yung mga tao ay naaalis sa kanilang mga tinitirang mga lugar at kadalasan ay hindi na nakakabalik o nililipat sa ibang lugar. One of the key challenges facing internal displaced people are food security, sustainable housing, access to basic education, especially those displaced for extended periods. Kung susuriin natin ito ng mabuti, ay hindi ito ordinaryong mga pangyayari sa ating bansa at kung gaano katindi ang pangangailangan nila sa mga panahong ganito. This leads us to the question, what is our moral duty as youth members of the community? First, we have this what we call the humanitarian response. Humanitarian response is an aid that seeks to save lives and alleviate the suffering of a crisis-affected population. We have here the United Nations 4 key principles underlying humanitarian action. First is humanity. Human suffering must be addressed wherever it is found. The purpose of humanitarian action is to protect life and health and even ensure respect for human beings. Second is neutrality. Humanitarian actors must not take sides in hostilities or engage in controversies of a political, racial, religious, or ideological in nature. Number 3 is impartiality. Humanitarian action must be carried out on the basis of need alone, giving priority to the most urgent cases of distress and making no distinctions on the basis of nationality, race, gender, religious belief, class, or political opinions. And lastly is independence. Humanitarian action must be autonomous from the political, economic, military, or other objectives that we bilang mga kabataan have the understanding of these challenges, strengths, and opportunities that affect our community. In the Philippines and worldwide, we have to move away from just humanitarian relief and move to a development work as well as preparedness. So we are now talking about disaster cycle, where response is just one component out of the 4. So we need to understand these 4 components one by one. So disasters are often thought as happening in a cyclical manner, consisting of 4 phases: preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. Preparedness process involves the creation of established plans to save lives when a tragedy happens and to mitigate damage. Disaster prevention and preparedness steps long before a disaster strikes should be established and put in place. This also includes identifying hazards, holding a family meeting, determining the best evacuation routes from your home, and practicing your family plan on a regular basis. Second is response. It is the step that we have to take to save lives and prevent more in a tragedy and loss. After a tragedy has struck, this process starts immediately. This includes the provision of first aid and medical assistance, the execution of search and rescue operations, and the reconstruction of transport and communication networks, as well as the surveillance of public health and the evacuation of people who are still vulnerable to the effects of the disaster. Sa mga prosesong ito ay ipinamimigay ang mga importanteng supply sa mga nakaligtas sa trahedya. Kasama na rito ang pagkain at tubig. Third is recovery. Actions at this level include the restoration and maintenance of essential health facilities, including water and sanitation systems, the repair and replacement or rehabilitation of assets, and the process management of dead bodies. To help mitigate the psychosocial impact on families, proper care of dead bodies is important. Fourth is mitigation. The mitigation stage is the continuous action or policy formulation that risks to individuals and property from a catastrophe are minimized or removed. Current plans for preparedness are viewed and updated in order to enhance the efforts to plan, building or improving dams and levees, developing stronger and safer building standards, buying fire insurance, and changing land use zoning are a few examples of activities that may take during the mitigation process. Again, a disaster cycle is composed of 4 phases: preparation, response, recovery, and mitigation. Upon doing this response, we are becoming virtuous, and thus we are promoting the common good of everybody. Though it may seemingly overwhelm an individual, we may be able to preserve the essence of bayanihan, helping one's national government and to become an active youth in a community. Therefore, is to be a virtuous youth in the current period is to actively engage in community-based youth organizations or initiatives that actively respond to both local and national emergencies. In the case of Hulog Paglaom, a student and youth-led organization is in the grounds of virtue ethics that the organization is rooted. This would then mean that this certain youth organization abides with the virtue of the mean, which was firstly introduced by Aristotle, and thus believes that goodness can be found in the mean between lack and excess, and to also consider that goodness is a habitual action. Since we are talking about common good, it is the goal of every individual in the community to establish a role that benefits the common good of each individual. It is in this theory that selfishness may deem to be prohibited or considered as an immoral act. Thus, in applying this theory in disaster preparedness, response, mitigation, and planning, it does not only benefit the youth, but also benefits the whole of the community. Therefore, as a citizen of the world, who relies basically on what the natural environment provides, the natural environment should be the most valued possession the humanity have. Hence, to take action against the threat of our environment and to participate in activities that would benefit the good of the ecosystem is justifiably right.
The moral duty of the youth in climate change mitigation and disaster response aims to provide the common good for every individual in the society. For the youth are the bearer of the sustainability in disaster risk management, and a lot of innovations will be sustained by those who have involved themselves in.
Aside from being enablers of disaster response, the youth does not only propel life recovery strategies to disaster victims, but the experience they will have from this will be integrated in their lives as they grow to be adults, and apply this in their family, career, and for the greater benefit of the community. Only in this immense effort which the environment and humanity can progressively coexist and thrive towards equal existence.
Xavier University at Niño de Cagayan offers Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy. For over decades of experiencing excellence, its philosophy program continues to embody the spirit of excellence, preparing and molding the students with priestly and religious life, and law and paralegal practice, and other field of studies. But there is more to discover. With quality learning begins from the competent philosophy instructors, to the leaping of one's faith towards enlightenment, and to uncover the idea of the divine through the pre-divinity track. Strengthen your logical judgment and your sense of justice through philosophy's pre-law track. Philosophy, the foundation of critical thinking, the root of our education, the beginning of journey to learning. In philosophy, there is more to wonder, more to ponder, and more to discover. Choose philosophy. Dare to think.
Before we proceed to our Q&A forum, we will send 2 questions to reflect on in Zoom inbox. Okay, so our questions are already sent. Okay, thank you. Before I will proceed to our Q&A questions, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Jovelyn L, Pinagawa, and I will facilitate the question and answer forum. You may unmute your mic to speak, or you can send it in our Zoom inbox.
I have a question. What are ways that we can apply this type of accountability na lang towards our government, our LGUs, and our our basically any political entity to promote a form of accountability in terms of, especially when we have storms here in the Philippines, what are ways we can present accountability to our ano na lang, LGUs and government officials?
So your question is, what are ways to promote accountability to our LGUs to promote disaster response, right?
Yes po, yes po.
I think we have Jacob to answer your questions. Your question, sorry.
Ang pinaka-accountable ang LGUs when it comes to disaster response promotion, as you said. Kay for the most sila we're in December, they have the influence to promote the disaster response and mitigation. Why are we saying that the youth engagement though is that it is just a mere participation for the youth to also encourage the LGU to have their own promotion on disaster response. Because sometimes, manggod, ang LGU, they cannot just, they really does not plan not unless a disaster is coming. No, so mostly ang maplan na lang is response and mitigation, but preparedness sometimes dili kay siya gaka-focus. LGU yun unta dapat nung ang manguna. So they are the very most accountable when it comes to disaster preparedness and response. And I hope that really answered your question, Jose.
Yes po, I'm satisfied po with your response.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose. Thank you, Jacob, for answering the questions. Any other questions, clarifications from the audience? Okay. Hi, Leslie. Her question is, why is environmental injustice a social injustice?
The question was about why is environmental injustice social injustice, right?
Yes.
So basically, it is because society depends on the environment, and society is rooted from the environment. And if environment has been abused, where would be the society, right? So if environmental injustice then is a social injustice, because where would society rooted? Where were we? There's no environment at all. So yeah, environmental injustice is a social injustice. I hope that will satisfy the question.
There is additional question, Jacob. Can you provide a concrete example?
Concrete example. Okay. For example, farming, perhaps, no. So farming, we rely farming in the environment, right? And society also rely their food for survival, no. And we get that food for survival in the environment. If we overuse the environment just for the farming, so we deforested a lot of forest just for farming, the equality perhaps has been diminished, ay mawawala na yung environment na kung saan sila yung natural na nagbibigay sa atin ng mga pangangailangan natin. And when we go towards and forward with farming alone, that will diminish the balance of the society and the environment as well. So yung means of survival natin malilisan sa tagal ng panahon. So humanity in nature cannot thrive. So if we continue to abuse our environment, environmental injustice, then society will be diminished as well. So that's why environment injustice is social injustice.
I hope he answered your question. Okay, so Lenny, do you have any questions?
Hi. Is it okay to just comment? Is it okay to comment on his answer a while ago?
Yes, po. Yes, po.
Because my question has something to do with the different social classes in society. We know we have the rich, we have the middle class, and we have the poor. And unfortunately, because of the different disasters that we experience and the different status that we are in. Those who are lower, or those who are in the lower class, are more vulnerable to these disasters. And I think my point there was for you guys to expound more on why the lower class are more vulnerable, and why is it a social injustice on their part, knowing that everyone experienced disaster, but unfortunately, because they are lesser in life, they suffer more, they experience more pain when it comes to these tragedy and disasters that we are experiencing.
Hi, Job.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, let me just join Mom Leslie there, no?
Okay po, sir.
Yeah, it's really a concern, no? I get it from the discussion presented by Jacob and Neil that the problem of environment directly affects society and people, no? And we're trying to address specific issues, how we can respond to this impact of environmental climate change. And in the response there, we are able to see, experience firsthand, especially in our country, since the Philippines is the first, is a pathway, a highway of all kinds of disasters, hazards, climate change. So that is why I think as a country and as a people, we really have to get ourselves thinking into this issue and really understanding the science and the ethics about climate change. So specifically, the implication on this issue is really affecting society, and the response is ideally a response that should address the most vulnerable. No? So here, the question of justice, inequality, distribution of the resources, especially those who are affected, comes in. So the injustice happens when we do not do anything, as a people, as a society, and addressing particularly those who are in need. Remember that this is also ethical discourse, and as such, there are a lot of moral obligations on our part to come to the assistance of those whose life are in need of or are threatened due to this impact of climate change. So if we are not responding well, then that is injustice on the part of those who are obligated to respond. And that's basically us individually and collectively as a community and as a structure, a political structure. So if our laws and our different structures of society, our local government, our provincial, regional, are not so designed and structured to address issues like this, then there is injustice there. No? So be it man-made or natural disaster, no? As presented in the talks of Neil and Jacob. No? So with regard, for example, to Marawi siege, it's a disaster. So if our collective effort as a government and as individuals, we do not take proper actions, then certainly, ignoring the call for response to this crisis is a moral issue, is a form of injustice. So I think it's really relevant to talk about these things that we are presenting, because this will not just bring us to the awareness that we have the moral obligation individually. We do not just look at government and social structures as being operated by responsible agencies or group of people, but first of all, we have to see it within ourselves. We have to be reflective of our own understanding of the problem, if there is a problem, and our own sense of commitment if there is a kind of solutions or alternative ways of addressing these issues, problems brought about by man, woman, individuals, and also by nature, no? Because of our this what they were talking about anthropogenic, that there is now human activities that are considered bad and considered contributory to the exacerbation of the destruction of climate and the unusual and abnormal weather flow, no? That resulted to basically flood in our countries, kanang mga baha o pang mga katalagman. No? Kana siya, I think these are issues of justice. So I do not know if it's too much to say those things, but I hope it added to the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, Sir Fermental, thank you so much, sir, for answering the questions. We have Neil. Yeah, to respond to the question of Miss Leslie. For a moment, we're having technical difficulty. We will go back later to the question of Miss Leslie. Let us move forward. Earlier, before we start our Q&A forum, we sent 2 questions to reflect on, and nandito na yun sa Zoom inbox natin. I hope you see it. The questions. The first question is, both man and the natural environment contribute balance and in ecosystem. How do you see yourself being one with the natural environment? The second question is, we usually respond to disasters by organizing relief operations. Do you think we have to move away from just doing a disaster response? So these 2 questions, we would like to ask volunteers from the audience to answer these questions or to have a reflection with these questions, reflections or insight. You can answer in Visayan language, Tagalog or English. Roxanne Reyes, Miss Roxanne.
Okay, so for the first one, how do I see myself being one with the natural environment? For me, to be one with the natural environment is to be a responsible steward. And like basically mao na nakana bitong we should to be one with the environment, dili lang nato ay dili lang ta dapat like mag-depend lang sa kung unsay ihatag sa environment, but also we must be kanang responsible, like dili ta magpalabi sa atong ma-exploit na nato ang nature. To be a responsible steward, one ang number 1. Number 2, I think kanang as much as possible we have to be do preventive measures pud bitaw, like in ourselves we have to be responsible with our trashes and like wala akong share.
Okay, Roxanne, thank you so much for that reflection. Okay, Lernie, do you have any reflection?
Yung bansa kasi natin, di ba, palagi na lang mayroong disaster. Tapos, yung government natin, paulit-ulit na lang yung ginagawa and paulit-ulit na lang din tayo nasasalanta. Tapos marami na taong namamatay. Bakit hindi na lang tayo parang improve yung natin, yung system natin para mas mabawasan yung magiging damage sa atin.
Okay, hello Ms. Lernie. Thank you so much for your reflection.
Excuse me.
Yes po.
Can I add to what Ms. Lernie just answered?
Oh, okay. Yes po. Yes po.
Okay, so we cannot really improve everything unless we are aware of our moral duty. So I guess this is why this study is relevant, because we are able to be aware of our moral duty. Ano ito, ga-continue na siya og gakahitabo. So in order to avoid that, we don't have to kanang plan on a disaster response. We have to avoid it. And by avoiding it, we must be aware of our moral duty to the environment. So, mo lang. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Miss Janine. Hello, Mr. Terence.
Yes.
Yes.
May I answer the question number 1?
Okay, yes, you
Okay.
can.
So hello everyone. I hope that everyone is doing well. With the response to the question number one, being able to live in this world and being part of the natural environment, we can do some actions, social movements, or it can be also environmental movements. Through doing that, I think that we can be able to preserve and conserve our nature, our environment for the next generations. And I think that this would be a perfect platform for us to help with each other and to spread that how important that nature is. I saw and observed some environmental actions, and because of that, they can be able to brought great impacts to the not just for themselves but also for the natures. Like people are, guardians of nature. It is necessary for us to take some actions with regards to any disaster um, problems like we are currently facing for, especially when it comes to the typhoons or any social phenomenon. And I think that natural environment should be balanced, and through that, everything will be fine and everything will be okay. So there's nothing to worry about. Okay, that's all.
Mr. Terence, thank you so much for your answer. Mr. Matt Louis, I think you have questions or can you have, yes?
Good morning.
And
Just want to add to the question number two. I think that we must move from just responding from or organizing relief operations in responding disaster, because as we know, this respond it's just temporary and it is not for long term. So, for instance, our environment really need practical and concrete and long-term solution to address the different environmental problems. This duty, as Ms. Janine answered earlier, is our moral duty. However, it also our, for me, it's our common duty also, because our environment is our common home. And so we are responsible in safeguarding it from all forms of harm. And to do that, of course, it must start within ourselves. No, we cannot just blame the government. We cannot just rant on government, because overall, it is our individual responsibility. And we can always do help in preserving our environment in our own little way by just following environmental policies. For instance, knowing how to segregate well our garbages. So I think that is somehow helpful to our environment. So that's all.
Okay, Mr. Matt Louis, sir, thank you so much for that reflection. Okay, sige, before we proceed, Mr. Neil Tagarao would like to answer the question of Ms. Leslie Amor.
Ayan, hello everyone. So I just have the technical difficulties regarding so my screen. So I am now using Nikka. So once again, I am Neil. So kanina Ma'am Lizelle asked about bakit ang mga poor yung mas affected when it times to disasters, and what is the relationship of climate justice as to social justice. So climate justice is a social justice because as we can see, for example, why are the poor population is most affected in this disaster. So as we can see, poor populations, the poor families, most of them are situated in risk areas. So kung mapapansin natin, mga squatter areas that are very susceptible to dangers, to disasters. So so poor families or the poor population are mostly situated in danger areas, which na disaster nga maigo gyud sila, especially sa riverbanks. We dapat untaan na is
What is the goal?
Prior to the occurrence of disasters,
What is the goal?
nanauntay dapat plan ana. So ang mag-spearhead ana, so ang ato ang government, sila ang magplan para sa ato ang mga urban cores na where they can situate para dili sila ma-danger ilang life. So dapat dili na hulaton no nga moabot ang disaster, moabot ang isa ka ang dili maayo nga panghitabo sa ilang kinabuhi. So again naatay we have the the right to live, so that is our right. So this right will be like put in danger when kita sa ang wala ta nagatag og solution ana nga mga butang. So katong namatay sa mga victims sa disasters no, kung natagaan lang sila og katong para ma-deter ta ani nga mga disasters. So that's it no. So thank you everyone.
Mary Lagura and Ralph have questions or reflections.
Hi, hello. Good morning.
Hello po.
Nakoy question lang.
Question. Okay po.
As beings who live in this world, we have the moral obligation towards its care. And yet there are a lot of people who don't do it. Do we consider these people who don't care for our environment as lacking in morals, seeing as it is our moral obligation?
Jacob will answer your question.
Oh, okay. As I've said no sa kanina a while ago in our speech, I have told it in the common good, the moral theory of the common good, which is selfishness is not really an option. So basically kaya tinatawag talagang immoral yung mga selfish no, sa sinabi mo kanina, yes, they are considered immoral. Yung mga hindi gumagawa sa kanilang duty to protect our environment, they are not thinking they are not for the common good of our people, for the society, and for the environment as well. So kaya they are considered immoral people, no, or immoral persons. So kasi nga, we have to be stewards of the environment. I hope that answered your question.
Yes po, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jacob and Miss Mary, to your question. Thank you. Ralph, do you have any question or reflection?
Ay, katong question, wala na to ate.
Okay, so we would like to thank you all for coming and for participating our webinar. Before we close the program, there will be certificates or a link to be sent here in Zoom inbox for the certificates, because it preserves as your certificate of participation. We really appreciate your presence, your participations, all your questions, your clarifications, your reflections. Thank you so much for that. Okay, Sir Pimentel.
Yeah, I just want to add and put some background on this very important webinar. And first of all, of course, I would like to congratulate Jovi, Nikka, Niño, Jacob, James, and Neil for really making their best effort to produce this webinar. I think the context of the webinar is really an application of Aristotle and Plato's ethics. And the group was able to successfully try to appropriate the golden mean, Aristotle's ethics on doctrine of the mean, trying to put in the idea of equilibrium, trying to avoid things that are excessive and things that are deficient, and the concept is being reflected on the idea of our stewardship to the environment. And I think it's very point there, that we have to be able to preserve the equilibrium, the balance of our ecosystem. And with regard to that, I think the question, what are we to do with people who are unable to conscientiously practice what is their moral duty as far as trying to keep the balance?
Thank you po.
The, the, the evidences of an imbalanced environment or ecosystem is before us. I mean, the death of many, the destruction of properties, and this erratic climate change is disturbing. So I think that's the evidence for us to not just reflect on, but to understand that the whole disaster issue is something that is overwhelming, and no matter sometimes how prepared a government, society, a community is with regard to disaster, it's really something beyond us sometimes, no? So it's something overpowering. So the most that we can do really is, yes, we take responsibility. And I think the concept and the moral philosophy of Aristotle is something that we can begin, individually, to have a sense of balance and understand how we keep the equilibrium of our ecological, our ecology, our relationship with the environment and our society. What is not quite emphasized, although it is implied in the webinar, is the philosophy of Plato here. And I think it's very important that the implication, as far as Neil and Jacob's presentation is concerned, that we really need to have a society, really need to have a structure of people organized, dealing with this very overwhelming problem of environmental change and justice. So Plato talks about the republic, and talks about that this republic is a composition of individuals or citizens who are deemed to be people who are conscious of society, conscious of the republic, the state. And in the Republic of Plato, it is a moral duty of everyone to really have a society that is just. There is law and order in society that keeps everyone moving and achieve their sense of meaning and truth in their living with each other. So therefore, it presupposes a moral duty that in order for us to have a just, where there is law and order in society, then the individual citizens must also be just, must also be virtuous. And I think those are very clearly said and articulated in the presentation. Although there was no mention of Plato, but practically, I mean, as we are saying, climate change is continuously affecting our way of life, our environment, and study shows that if this is not something mitigated, meaning tried, the society, everyone looking into this and working in solidarity, bayanihan, to address the problem, within 50 years' time, in your lifetime, you would have an increase of the heat, the global warming. Although we heard some good news that because of this pandemic and the stoppage of many industries and emission of carbon, there seems to be a healing of the ozone layer. But the threat is still there. And the study shows that in 50 years' time, which is within your lifetime, there will be more heat and global warming. And just imagine if our summer would be 3 or 4 times warmer and hot, then it will certainly disrupt human society. So the good thing about this webinar also is that youth, what is the response of the youth? In environmental justice, one of the factors that is very important to look into as part of the checklist that there is environmental justice is not just about those who are vulnerable. So the vulnerability of those who will be affected, individuals, are not just people who are old, pregnant women, those who are sick, and those who are near hazard areas, but they're talking about the next generation. So those who will benefit and those who will be coming in to this world to live an environment that is just for them. So that environmental justice, or to be just as a people addressing these present challenges of the republic, of the state, global and national and local, is for the sake of the next generation. Young people, though you are already born, you are the next generation together with those who are still unborn. Those people who will be your children. So this is not just any kind of a fancy discussion or a kind of joy kind of ideas, and we'll just keep up these things in our mind, and yet does not manifest in our action. Precisely, it is a moral duty. Precisely, it is an ethical. It is something that each and every young individual must also ask themselves. Unsa man ang pinakamaayo maangay na akong ma ma-expect sa akong mga katiguangan sa ilang pagmugna o pagpadayon, pag-develop sa usa ka klase nga kalibutan nga ang akong kinabuhi pag-abot sa iyang panahon makambot nako ang akong kaayuhan. So kung ang mga henerasyon na mo'y responsable karon, dili lang ang gobyerno tanan. This is a bayanihan. This is not just we trying to complain about what the government is doing. It is really the entirety. It's not easy, but it's really the whole structure of society, both institutional government and us individual. The sense of solidarity is a moral principle also that can be emphasized. And I think Neil mentioned about bayanihan. The whole bayanihan in our cultural something that flows in our system as Filipinos is called upon into a more global bayanihan. So this thing, what would be the kind of environment or Cagayan de Oro or Bukidnon or Samar or Leyte or Manila or Pilipinas or East Asia or the whole of the global, what would be the kind of planet Earth that you and your children will have to have in order for you to live the good life? So maybe your issues are not the same as the issues of Jose Rizal, Bonifacio, Gregorio del Pilar, or Juan Maria during the 1700s Philippines. But you're having this, the good and the bad, especially this question about climate justice. So I think Plato will still reverberate in our moral consciousness when we try to achieve that we could not address these challenges of climate change and environmental justice all by ourselves. There has to be a republic, a society, a collective group of people who are serious to really concretize what are the right actions that will address this threat to our humanity. So thank you for the group in coming up with this webinar, and thank you especially also for your invited guests for participating and trying to discern and deliberate and think with us the questions that we post in our webinar. So, daghang salamat.
Thank you so much, guys, to everyone. Happy lunch po.
For over decades of experiencing excellence, its philosophy program continues to embody the spirit of excellence, preparing and molding the students with priestly and religious life. in law and paralegal practice and other fields of studies. But there is more to discover. With quality learning begins for the competent philosophy instructors. To the leaping of one's faith towards enlightenment and to uncover the idea of the divine through the pre-divinity track. Strengthen your logical judgment and your sense of justice through philosophy's pre-law track. Philosophy, the foundation of critical thinking, the root of our education, the beginning of journey to learning. In philosophy, there is more to wonder, more to ponder, and more to discover. Choose philosophy. Dare to think.